Who did Cain actually marry? If Adam and Eve were the very first humans, how on earth, quite literally, did Cain find a wife so soon after leaving Eden? This question has challenged believers, intrigued skeptics, and sparked debates for centuries. Some say the answer is hidden between the lines of the biblical text. Others claim we need ancient extra-biblical writings to solve this puzzle. Whichever viewpoint you take, you can't deny that this issue cuts right to the heart of how we understand the earliest chapters of Genesis, and it might just reshape how you see the entire biblical narrative. Before we peel back the layers of this biblical riddle, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We tackle Scripture's most perplexing mysteries, challenge common misconceptions, and dive into ancient sources to bring you deeper insight. If you're ready to explore questions that most people shy away from, you're in the right place. Here's the standard storyline most of us know. After Cain murders his brother Abel, Genesis 4 verse 8, God confronts Cain and sentences him to wander the earth as a fugitive for 12. In response, Cain fears for his life, insisting that anyone who finds him could kill him, 4:14, a peculiar statement if there were supposedly no other humans besides Adam, Eve, and himself at the time. Shortly afterward, Cain leaves for the land of Nod, east of Eden, for 16. Then all of a sudden we read, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, for 17. But where exactly did this wife come from? Common explanations. 1. Cain married his sister, or close relative. A long-held traditional view suggests Adam and Eve had many children, even if Scripture doesn't list them individually. Cain's wife would then be his sister, niece, or another close relative, an idea that can raise modern ethical and biological eyebrows, but might not have carried the same weight in the dawn of humanity. 2. There were other humans created besides Adam and Eve. Another viewpoint suggests Adam and Eve were special representatives among a broader human population. In this reading, Cain's wife comes from outside Adam's immediate family, though this stance often requires a less literal understanding of Adam and Eve as the only humans. 3. Allegorical or symbolic reading. Some scholars take an approach that these Genesis narratives are primeval stories communicating theological truths rather than strict genealogical records. From that vantage point, details about Cain's wife are meant to underscore bigger themes, like the spread of civilization and sin, rather than provide a literal list of descendants. As we'll see, this question isn't just about naming a single woman. It's about grappling with how the Bible frames the earliest chapters of humanity's existence. According to the genealogies in Genesis 5, people in that era reputedly lived for several centuries. Adam is said to have lived 930 years, Genesis 5 verse 5. If that's the case, Adam and Eve, as the first humans, could have produced a very large family tree over the course of their lives. By the time we get to Cain in Genesis 4, there may have been numerous siblings, nieces, nephews, and grandchildren spread across a relatively vast region. Ancient Near Eastern context. In Mesopotamian literature, like the Sumerian king list, figures are also recorded as having extraordinarily long lifespans, which could indicate that biblical writers were situating the genealogies within a broader cultural lens. Civilization in these ancient texts often springs up rapidly around a few key figures. So the biblical description of Cain building a city and naming it after his son Enoch, Genesis 4 verse 17, wouldn't seem as bizarre in an ancient context where rapid expansions of population could be woven into epic narratives. Marriage laws in later Scripture. Modern readers might recoil at the possibility of Cain marrying his sister or niece. But keep in mind that prohibitions against close-kin marriages, like those we see in Leviticus 18-20, come much later in Israel's history. The idea is that early on, God may have allowed close-kin unions to populate the world, with later laws forbidding such practices as humanity grew. Analysis of key passages and scholarly debates. 1. Genesis 4 verses 13-17. Cain's fear, whoever finds me will kill me, 4:14. One of the earliest hints that others existed beyond Adam's immediate circle. If we assume a literal reading, Adam and Eve might have had numerous unnamed children by this point. Land of Nod, for 16 literally means wandering or exile in Hebrew. The text doesn't say much about Nod. Some have speculated it's a metaphorical expression for Cain's restless destiny. Still, it does appear that people live there, or at least travel there. Cain's wife, for 17, the text never names her. Rabbinic tradition in some commentaries suggests her name might have been Awan or sometimes Luluwa, gleaned from extra-biblical or later Jewish folklore, but these are not explicitly biblical details. 2 Genesis 5 verse 4. This verse states Adam had other sons and daughters, though they remain unnamed. This is the primary biblical basis for the idea that Cain married a sister or another close female relative. 3. The Book of Jubilees, an extra-biblical text. The Book of Jubilees, often included in the Ethiopian Orthodox canon, elaborates on Genesis with additional details. According to Jubilees 4:9, Cain's wife is his sister Awan. While not accepted as scripture by most Christian denominations, Jubilees reflects an early Jewish tradition that cements the Cain married his sister view. 4. The Book of Enoch and Dead Sea Scrolls. While 1 Enoch focuses more on the Watchers and the Nephilim, it indirectly supports the idea of rapid population increase and intermingling, hinting that the earliest generations could expand swiftly. The Dead Sea Scrolls also contain fragments that reiterate genealogical expansions, though they don't directly name Cain's wife. Nonetheless, they reflect the broader worldview of ancient Judaism, one in which biblical genealogies often serve as theological underpinnings for the human story, rather than exhaustive family records. Literalist approach. Argument: Adam and Eve were the lone progenitors of humanity. Cain's wife had to be a sister, niece, or another close kin. No contradiction arises because at this early stage, intermarriage was necessary for the survival of the human race and was not yet prohibited by divine law. Biblical basis relies on Genesis 5 verse for mentioning unnamed offspring and emphasizes that the moral laws surrounding incest came later. 2. Representative or figurative Adam and Eve. Argument: Adam and Eve may be archetypal figures chosen by God from a larger pool of humans. Cain's wife could be from a different lineage. This view tries to reconcile the biblical account with anthropological data suggesting Homo sapiens existed long before any historical figure named Adam. Biblical basis. Interpreters highlight that Genesis 2-3 often uses figurative language and symbolic names. Adam equals humanity, Eve equals life. They see the other people implied by Cain's fear in 4:14 as actual separate communities. 3. Gap theory or other creative readings. Argument: some propose that the biblical text is telescoping history. What seems like a short series of events might actually span centuries. Cain's wife could have been born decades or centuries later, once Adam's lineage had greatly multiplied. Others speculate about different timelines or hidden narratives not fully detailed in Genesis. Biblical basis. The genealogies in Genesis are often condensed and selective, not always listing every individual. This leaves room for a multitude of descendants to exist. 4. Ancient mythological influence. Argument: a portion of scholarly thought treats the Cain narrative as a mytho-historical account influenced by other Mesopotamian stories of city-building heroes. For them, the question who was Cain's wife might be a category error if the text's primary aim is theological symbolism rather than genealogical detail. Biblical basis emphasizes that in the ancient world, myths serve to explain origins and moral truths rather than provide modern-style historical or genealogical precision. Theological and practical insights. 1. The importance of choice and consequence. Genesis 4 isn't just about where Cain found his wife. It's about the unraveling of sin and its consequences. Cain, the firstborn of humanity's initial family, commits an act of violence that echoes through generations. The presence of any wife, sister or otherwise, underscores the rapid spread of humanity alongside the rapid spread of sin. In a fallen world, human relationships become complicated, painful, and morally tangled. 2. God's mercy in the midst of judgment. Even after Cain's grievous crime, God places a mark of protection on him. Genesis 4 verse 15. This nuance shows that while judgment is real, God's mercy extends beyond our expectations. The very question of Cain's wife is part of a bigger tapestry where life goes on, new generations are born, cities are established, and the human story continues despite humanity's rebellion. 3. We all inherit brokenness, yet have hope. The tension that arises from trying to identify Cain's wife hints at how swiftly sin spreads, but it also indicates that God allows humanity to continue. Each new child, each fresh start, is an invitation to turn back to God. In many ways, all subsequent biblical narratives, Noah's flood, Abraham's calling, Israel's story, and ultimately the coming of Christ, respond to the problem that first erupted with Cain's violent act. Why does it matter today? 1. Foundations of faith. Understanding Cain's story can shape how we read the rest of Genesis. If we see the earliest chapters as theological anchors rather than mere curiosities, we appreciate why biblical authors repeatedly emphasize human dignity, sin's pervasiveness, and God's redemptive plan. 2. Moral and ethical reflections. The question of Cain's wife inevitably brings up incest in the earliest human family. While uncomfortable, it challenges us to recognize that moral frameworks develop over time in Scripture. God progressively reveals laws that shape how his people treat one another. 3. Dialogue with science and history. Those who seek harmony between faith and scientific theories of human origins often revisit Cain's wife to propose models that accommodate real population genetics. Whether one lands on the traditional or non-traditional side, the discussion fosters constructive dialogue about how Scripture intersects with other fields of knowledge. 4. Embracing mystery. In the end, the Bible is not always explicit about the how of certain events. The fact that Genesis never names Cain's wife can be a profound invitation to embrace some level of mystery, focusing on the purpose of the narrative, to reveal God's character, humanity's need for salvation, and the unstoppable forward motion of God's plan. Common misunderstandings. This contradicts the Bible, so it must be false. Some readers assume the silence about Cain's wife is a contradiction. But silence isn't a contradiction. Genesis may simply choose not to provide details. It's incest, so the Bible supports immorality. Remember that the moral prohibitions in the law of Moses came later, Leviticus 18-20. Many interpreters argue that God allowed early close-kin marriages specifically to populate the earth before societal structures and risks of genetic disorders became significant factors. All this proves the Bible is just myth. Ancient narratives often blend theological claims with historical claims in ways modern readers don't always expect. Even if certain details appear puzzling, that doesn't negate the text's deeper spiritual and theological messages. Let's pause for a mini-narrative that might have swirled through ancient imaginations. Cain in Nod. The desert air was scorching under Cain's weary feet. Exiled and marked, he trudged eastward. The land of Nod shimmered like a mirage, unwelcoming yet strangely alive with the promise of new beginnings. He was astonished to find other wanderers there, travelers who shared stories by firelight. Among them was a woman with questioning eyes, one who listened to Cain's tale of Eden lost and a brother's blood that cried from the ground. Moved by his sorrow, or perhaps by the mark that glowed upon him, she agreed to journey with him. In time, they built a life, culminating in the birth of a son named Enoch. Stones and mortar rose into a fledgling city, echoing with laughter and occasional whispers of wrongdoing. Even in the midst of Cain's torment, the spark of life persisted, testifying to the relentless spread of humanity across the earth. Though we don't know the exact details, scenes like these remind us that the Bible is a tapestry of real human emotions, moral choices, and the ever-present possibility of redemption, even for those who carry burdens like Cain's. The question of who was Cain's wife might seem like a historical or genealogical curiosity, but it opens a window onto some of Scripture's grandest themes: the spread of humanity, the tragedy of sin, and God's unrelenting commitment to redeem creation. Whether you believe Cain married his sister, a distant cousin from Adam's other children, or someone from outside Adam and Eve's immediate family, the heart of the narrative remains the same: Humanity struggles with sin from the very first pages of the Bible, yet God continually works his sovereign plan through flawed people and unexpected circumstances. If this exploration sparked new questions or deepened your appreciation for biblical complexities, be sure to like this video, share it with a friend who loves ancient mysteries, and subscribe to our channel. We've got more deep dives into unsolved biblical puzzles, apocryphal texts, and the hidden cultural treasures of the ancient Near East coming your way. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. How do you reconcile this mystery, and what does it reveal about your understanding of God and Scripture? Remember, the mysteries in the Bible aren't roadblocks to faith. They're invitations to plunge deeper into a story that has shaped countless lives across millennia. Stay curious, stay open-minded, and above all, stay rooted in the belief that every question can lead us closer to the ultimate author of all truth. Thank you for joining me in this journey through one of Genesis' most enduring enigmas. Until next time, grace and peace, and see you in the next video.